Michael, welcome.
Good morning.
Yeah, good afternoon. Are you afternoon there? I forget.
Yes, it's just
Yeah,
afternoon.
yeah. No lunch for you today?
A little while.
All right. So welcome, Michael O'Hara. You've done some amazing things. You and I just met not that long ago, but the connection was so strong. You know, you and I just had so much synergy. We're going to have to be careful today that we don't go over the time limit, right? But it's very exciting to have you. I know you've been doing some amazing things. You've done some fractional CXOs work. You've done some coaching. You've got a great career background. But maybe we'll kick off and let you talk a little bit about your background, your focus, and then we'll see if we can gift the people today in our conversation.
Terrific. So Michael O'Hara, originally a Colorado native, and I live in Princeton, New Jersey now, which is just a 50-minute train ride from New York City and 45-minute drive to Philadelphia. I've been described as a serial CEO. That might be too generous. I advise companies, private equity, and venture capital, especially on troubled companies, troubled portfolio companies. And trouble might mean they're really in trouble. They've got issues with capital. They've got issues with hiring people, with organizational design and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, it's someone that ultimately has their eye on an exit and wants to, to make sure that it's like fixing up a house before you sell it. And so the VCs in New York think of me as kind of a fix-it person. I would say elsewhere in the United States, I'm thought of more of a marketing strategist, someone who's run a number of companies. I guess I've been CEO of 9 companies, which means I can either not keep a job or we get things sold. I'm also a partner in a BPO, a business process outsourcer in Zambia, Africa. It's a socially conscious company that we hire young people out of high school and some out of college, and we provide them computer training, Western business skills, so that they can work on data research, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and things of that nature. There's 59% unemployment in 18 to 30-year-olds, and for every Zambian that we employ, it feeds 6 people. So I do that as a labor of love. They speak wonderful English, so I don't have to adapt to language skills or anything like that. And occasionally I'll get down to Zambia.
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations. Yeah, I know you and I have talked many times about some of the things you've done, but really today we want to share some of that wisdom with the audience and touch on some of those things. I won't ask you to go through all of those functions that you've done. We don't have that much time, but I know you've been working specifically on some models that you are, you feel like that's the gap that people are dealing with. And you and I have talked maybe a little too much about sailing. I love sailing. You're an avid sailor. And there's just so many synergies between what happens on a boat and what happens in the boardroom. Wouldn't you agree?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Organized.
So have you done some things with that?
So I have taken management teams out on my personal sailboats over the course of the years. One of my fantasies with a colleague who had a PhD in psychiatry or psychology rather, we wanted to buy a 100-foot oyster boat in the Chesapeake Bay and do kind of an outward bound for business executives, and kind of founded on the logic and the thought and on a small management team. So we go out on my boat. And with my family, I've always done this with my family, is who's ever at the helm has control. And one of the things CEOs and leaders managers and leaders need to learn how to do is to let go. You have to let go. If someone has the helm, they're deciding where the boat is going at that moment. They're saying, trim the sails, let the sails out. We're going to tack. We're going this direction. And generally speaking, the management team agrees on a course. You plot your course just like you do with a business strategy in a company. You decide how you're going to get from to X to to Y, and you set a course, and then whoever has the helm is instructing the rest of the crew what they have to do in order to achieve that accomplishment. So it's great for a manager to be telling his or her CEO and C-level suite what to be doing, but it's also great for the C-suite and the CEO to let go and receive instructions, and then you're all working towards a common good. So I think it's very much like that in business. I mean, I think there's too many leaders that put themselves up on a pedestal and expect and demand that they get respect from their teams, and because I have this lofty office and I make this kind of money, and you work for me, and so you look up to me for everything. And that's the antithesis of, to me, what good leadership is. Good leadership is, as you're down at their level, you're not afraid to accept leadership. You're not afraid to make decisions that are difficult ones, and the burden does fall on you. But if you're a good leader, you're letting your employees do their jobs. You're letting your employees fail. It's important. We learn more by the fish that got away than the fish we caught and we had for dinner. Companies, employees expect their leadership. The one thing that they're just craving is, what are the values of the organization, and not some value statement written by HR. What is the goal of the company this year and for 5 years? And then how do I fit in that goal? So you can't micromanage. You can't be ambiguous with your message of what the company's goals are. But it's really, really important for employees to know what's expected of them by their leadership, and then let me do my job. Get out of the way. Norman Schwarzkopf said back in the first Gulf War, he said, a title gives you responsibility, but people give you respect. And I believe the only way you get respect is by earning it. You can't legislate respect. I can't say, you must respect me, you must like me, you must worship me from afar. That's nonsense. The way that I'm going to get a team that's galvanized and wants to work together and towards a common goal is by giving them the tools, giving them the authority. They say it in lead generation. It's BANT: budget, authority, the need, and the timeline. Give people a wide berth, because we may all agree where the starting point is. We may all agree what our goal is for the end point, but rarely is a path straight. It's circuitous. It wiggles. It zags. Saying, the KPIs and mileposts along the road are often different than what you think they are. And it very, very well may be that your employee has a better idea or a better, course to plot than you do. And boy, you want people to be loyal and you want people to respect management, is let them fail and don't punish them for that, because you may learn from that experience. You will learn from that experience. I read this morning in an article, the CIO at Harvard was saying they expect the technology companies that they deal with, that 40% will be successful and 60% will fail. They calculate as part of their business model a 60% failure rate. I'm a fail forward person. I can never imagine plotting a 60% failure rate. But I thought it was just brilliant when I read that this morning.
Very interesting. And there's just so many things in what you say there, and I have to be careful not to jump around too much, but I do remember a story. I think it was back in the 80s or 90s, that one of the biggest companies in the world, and I'll leave names out for the moment, the director of IT at the time made a multi-million-dollar mistake. And when the CEO was asked, how come you haven't let them go? He goes, I've just paid multi-million-dollar lesson to teach this guy. I'm not giving him to somebody else. That whole fail forward and failure is so important, but to recognize that investment as well, right? So I love that story. I was going to ask back in the sailing thing, because there's just so much in what you said that relates to sailing. What you're doing on a boat is rotating people around. Is that right?
Yes,
So that the CEO maybe starts at the helm, but then somebody else takes over and they have to pull ropes and they
that's
have
right.
to take instructions.
That's right.
And how does that
So
pan out? Have you had some surprises there? Or
well, like sailing is not that hard. I think I think people look that don't understand sailing and look at it and say, "Wow, that's there's a lot of ropes, there's a lot of lines," but it really is much more basic and simple than that. But think of it. You don't take off from a marina. A cruise ship captain doesn't leave. A naval captain doesn't leave from the berth unless they have a plan. What was it? Was it Yogi Berra, a great baseball player who had these great sayings? Said, "If you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else." And you have to plot, what the plan is. And like I said, the management team and the employees of any company expect their leadership, their CEO especially, to have that vision. This is where we're going to go. Do we all agree that we're going to go to this point? Everybody agrees. All right. So to your point, captain might take the boat out onto the water and then relinquish control under the understanding that we're going to this point, and this is how we're going to get there. And a sailboat is a classic example, because there's never a straight course. You tack, you zigzag. You have to get the wind coming from a favorable direction in order to push you in a direction, but the wind actually pushes you out of course, as you go to leeward, away from the wind. And so you're constantly adjusting the sails. Was it Maxwell who said that the pessimist, complains about there's no wind, and the optimist, adjusts the sails. So you have to adjust the sails, because it rarely is that consistent. So you rotate. I found that rotating that is great, and when it's someone else's turn to take the helm, he or she then gets to to kind of, and it's scary, by the way. So you're barking out orders because there's some uncertainty from that person. They may be new to sailing, they may be new to boating in general, and now you've put them at the wheel. So you take all the information that's been provided to you, the instruction, the tools, the authority that's been given you, and you say, my best judgment is the way the wind is blowing, that we need to turn, we need to tack. Right. And so everybody says, just say the word and ready to come about, and heartily, and we tack. And now it's you're on a different tack, and then eventually someone takes control because you're trying to advancing your position, and it's a humbling experience. It's a humbling experience on both sides.
Very humbling, I think, for people to relinquish control like that. And I hear several subline stories within that. One is, the person you put at the helm, do you give them the right training? Do you give them the right, procedure? Do they know where we're going? What's the goal? Where are we going to attack? All of these things, having some clear, they're almost, the parallel to work is, this is your objective and these are your KPIs. This is where you're going to attack.
Right.
And then the second part of that is, by having the CEO move through every function on the boat, what do they learn, right?
Well, it's kind of a reverse MBA training program, right? Because they're learning, they're getting their hands dirty. They're understanding it from an experiential position. And I think it's really important at the office to do the same thing. No one expects the CEO or the C-suite to be the best salesperson there or the best accountant, but they do expect them to understand fundamental accounting and where our books are right now. They do understand that you got to know how to ask for a close, because without knowing why people are and are not buying your services or goods, you really never can really understand it. The old phrase that says, tell me something, I hear it, show me something, I see it, but let me touch it and I understand it. And the only way a good operator can lead his or her company is by, touching all parts of the business. But That's not to tell people how to do their jobs. It's to understand what those people are going through to do their jobs so that you can better, instruct or advise on a better course of sailing.
Mhm. It's such an interesting topic, and I'm a firm believer of that. I always remind people leadership. It's two words: leader and ship.
Mm.
And you'll never come across a ship captain that doesn't know every function on that ship.
That's correct.
So how come we're moving down this journey that I hear a lot of people, focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. You don't need to know that. You just delegate and give it to somebody else. Is that borderline abdication?
It is. I mean, in some ways, you can liken this to sports, soccer, American football. You're doing plays. You can't, make a good run down the field if you don't know who your star players are and your strengths are with the left foot and with certain kinds of offending players or defensive players. You also can't do a really good job if you don't understand your weaknesses. I love baseball. Watching baseball last night, and the strategy is what's really, to me, the most intriguing thing about baseball. And it's a statistical game, strategic game. It's whether someone's throwing left hand or right hand. I saw a guy last night from the opposing team pull out of his back pocket. He pulled out a card before he was going back to his position. He wanted to know what batter was up against the pitcher, what kind of pitch might be thrown, and where he could expect the ball to end up if there was a successful hit. You've got to know your strengths. You've got to know your weaknesses. You can't have a game plan for anything, whether it be business or sports, if you or sailing, if you don't know your strengths and weaknesses, and you don't know, you want to anticipate. It's like sailing. I remember the only time I've ever gotten in trouble on a sailboat is where I really didn't pay attention to the weather forecast before I set out, and that's really a sophomoric move.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in such a hurry to go someplace. It becomes secondhand nature. It's like walking up and down the stairs. You don't think about it. You push off. You didn't check the weather report, and then you get out in the middle of a weather system or something like that, and you'll be in real trouble.
Yeah.
And one time I did it with my wife and my daughter, who was all of probably 4 months at the time, 5 months maybe. And we were in a completely irresponsible situation. It's because I didn't plan ahead. I didn't check the weather. And that's the metaphor for business. You've got to anticipate the weather. You've got to anticipate what the competition is doing. You've got to anticipate. If you know your strengths and weaknesses, you know how to fulfill them. You know what kinds of people you say, I need to bring in Bob or Jane because they're particularly good at it. Let's see if we can get them to do it. We may need to find someone else to do some of what Bob and Jane were working on today as part of organizational design. But at the end of the day, it's taking advantage of your strengths and not letting ego drive the course.
Yeah. And I remember you sharing a story when you became a ski instructor. Right. And what they put you through there. And
I thought I was a pretty good skier, and I mean, and that you tried out, and it was weeks of clinics, and there were several hundred people that were going for a few roles, and I lucked out and got a job, and my head was swollen, and I was all of 18, and I met the head of the ski school, and he said, congratulations, this is the only thing we're gonna have to do. And I said, what's that, Pete? He says, we're gonna have to teach you how to ski. And I deflated right away, and we then spent the next like 6 weeks clinicking on if I want to get you to put weight down the hill, I need to trick you how to hand your poles to me, or I can't say you're counter angulating and you're not going down the fall line because you're trying, first of all, you don't want to think about anything when you're doing sports. And I had to learn how to ski all over again. I had to learn how to teach. And I think one of our failures in management, to bring that back to management and running businesses, and when I go in and I look at a troubled company, is we put people in managerial roles and we don't teach them to be managers. And some people, companies say, oh yeah, but we've taught them, they learn these systems, we let them do webinars and things like that. But no, you didn't teach people how to lead. Managers are teachers.
Mhm.
The C-suite should be teachers and fashion themselves as teachers. And you really, if you want to be good, and again, the biggest weakness, you take a company, they lose their top salesperson or sales manager. So they say the top salesperson says, if I don't get that job, I'm going someplace else. So you put your top salesperson in the sales management role, and that salesman, by the way, he or she is the best salesperson out there, is now the manager, and you wonder why everybody can't stand the manager. It's become dysfunction junction now, and it's because you didn't teach that top salesperson how to manage, how to work with people. He or she may not even have that proclivity. They may be terrible managers, and you're never going to make them good managers. And then we lose all productivity in sales because you promoted your best salesperson, took them off the road, and now you've made them a manager. So we failed in two ways. We didn't teach the up and comer, the rising salesperson, how to be a manager and direct and work with people and teach people. And then we didn't teach the people underneath that sales manager to sell. So it compounds itself. We see this all the time. In oftentimes the biggest problem in companies that are failing is just a small tweaking of organizational design. We don't pay people the way they should be paid. It's not in line with our expectations. I can't just pay you a salary because that doesn't tell you what I want you to do or what I and the company need you to do for us to be successful. And if you're going to give people the tools to be successful, got to have the vision. They've got to know where the company is going, or they're going to wind up someplace else. They got to have the tools, the authority to do their jobs. They've got to be trained. And one of the best ways you can do it is by paying people the right way.
You touch on a pet peeve of mine, and that is, I called it a few years ago. I did a video on it, leadership, but not before management. And the thing that we saw back then was, and it's very similar to what you're talking about, but it's the blame. I hired this person; they should know what they're doing, but your company is different, your culture is different, your systems are different. So the abdication of throwing blame easily because you're supposed to know what you're doing. It's just so wrong. And so I called it, leadership, but not before management, because managers, as you say, their responsibility is to make sure the training is in place, the KPIs are in place, all the systems are in place, they're doing all the tracking in place. And you can't just step out of that and lead people if you haven't done that foundational stuff, right?
You can't. I mean, the definition of management in the paper version of the dictionary, which some people may have heard of, they used to come out in paper, was management is getting things done through others. The Webster Dictionary that was given to me when I graduated from high school. It's management, getting things done through others. Think about what that means. It doesn't say being smarter, being paid more, being better educated, having more experience. It is the ability, think of this teaching skiing or being a sailboat captain, of getting other people to do other things. And if you ever want to have a life as a manager, you've got to empower your people to do the job, not be afraid to fail, and let it work its magic. But the way you manage people is to get them to do the things that you need them to do. And that requires teaching and counseling and mentorship and tools that will enable that journey to be as quick as possible, not drag out for too long a period of time, which you can't afford.
And, just to bring in a little bit of Acumatch gives us that specificity, because what we've been talking about is a lot of skill-based stuff, but there is a behavior component that comes into that. And, I don't know of any other tool like Acumatch that can quickly show us the different thinking patterns that we have on the team, the different types of people and their preferences, their way of responding to situations. And not to digress into another topic, but we talked about this one person that saw the glass almost empty all the time and challenged everything because he didn't trust where the company was going and so forth. But I think that the key element that I think we have time to go into, if you don't mind, that is that performance payment structure.
Yes.
I think you've developed something that's really
let me set that up, and thank you for bringing it up, because while it looks like a lot of numbers, it's really fundamentally, I believe that if the company has a goal, that everybody that works for that company's personal goals and KPIs need to roll up ultimately to the goal of where the company is going. So if the company is set out to do X $million this year or X $100,000 this year, and the CEO from the board of directors or the ownership, or maybe he or she, is the owner of the company, they have to have goals, and then their subordinates have goals that support that goal, and as it goes all the way down. And I think I mentioned to you about I put this program in where it's a bonus program that's tied to the company's success. If the company is making at least 80% of its goals, that everybody has agreed that is a sales forecast that's reasonable and sound, then that triggers a KPI performance bonus that with at least 5 or 6 criteria that you've given me to saying, this is what you need to do. You need to jump this high, how high. I believe that a variable compensation plan is a silent manager, is a silent sales manager or a silent manager. There should be no ambiguity if the boss takes a week off and goes on vacation for what I think he or she wants me to do this week. What is expected of me? I abhor annual reviews, quarterly reviews, biannual reviews. I think they're a complete waste of time. They take too much time to do. And if my employee is waiting for a quarterly or a biannual time to sit down with me to know how I think they're doing, then I'm a complete failure as a manager. It should be, like I said, no ambiguity. Here's the goals for the company. Here's the goals for each individual that roll up to that goal. And here's, how we're all going to achieve it. Then everybody's on the same play length. Think of it like an American football player. Everybody has a play, whether they're blocking or they're tackling or they're catching or they're running interference or faking the ball, that all has a role in getting the ball across the goal line. And the only way that gets done is if everybody knows what's expected of them. And a great way to do that, and it can be done very inexpensively, is paying people a variable compensation plan that rolls up to the strategy. And that's everyone. That's not just sales. That's not just management. I had a Guatemalan cleaning lady who spoke very little English, and she had a goal. One of her goals in her KPIs was to keep the cost of the commissary, coffee, soda pop, snacks, and all that stuff meaningful, because she worked for HR, and one of HR's tenets was making sure that we're making the employees happy, but we're doing it within budget. So this particular woman came running into me one day. This was a software development company, and she showed me a can of Red Bull, and she held up a cup of coffee, and she said, Mr. Michael, and she's fishing for work. She says, $2.57, and then she pointed the coffee cup. Now, it was 15 cents or 25 cents. It was very, very cheap. She says, why are we buying Red Bull basically instead of just giving them coffee? And part of it's because the engineers are a bit, that you have to give them little perks, and their little perks was their Red Bull. But the point was, I said, that's when I had the light come on. It says this whole idea about variable compensation for everybody in the company works and supports the goals, because that was her window, and knows that's part of what she was being measured by, which also her boss was happy to look at that, because that's what she was being measured by. And then again, it rolls up to the goals of the company, and that's hopefully making money or serving a higher purpose in a a not-for-profit. But you still got to operate, and so that variable compensation plan is elegantly simple. It looks more complicated than it is, but it's a way that will drive everybody, whether it's 10 people in your company or 10,000 people in your company, it can be done very, very well. And then I always know what my boss expects me to do. And you can also, it's very wonderful for the employee because they can come back and the boss says, Nagui, you're doing a terrible job. I'm saying, hold on a second. I'm at 120% of goal on all my KPIs. What was it that we didn't agree to on this thing? And by the way, the boss and the employee agrees to those KPIs. They're not legislated to them. They're saying, what do you think about these KPIs? And it's negotiated. And, you didn't ask me to do that. That was never part of the thing. I mean, so there's a little self-protection there, but it's just, people want to know how they're doing, and they want to know what they do is important to the success or has a role in the company meeting its goals. People, younger generations today are craving that kind of nurturing. And a good manager cannot discount that. Someone my age can't say, these young people, they just don't know what hard work means. We as an older generation have actually created this nightmare, and we have not, nurtured that and mentored that and taught that. We've not lived up to our responsibility, in my opinion, as leaders.
And, as you're talking there, one of the things that comes to mind also is, Richard Branson's quote that I love is, hire for attitude and teach skills, right? Is attitude and behavior an important part of the KPIs?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. And I thank you for asking that question, because I fundamentally believe there are two kinds of people: those who are born with a pilot light and those who are born without. Because if you're not born with a pilot light, one cannot be installed after manufacture. So, I mean, people born without a pilot light should be accountants. You don't want your accountant, you don't want your CFO coloring outside the lines.
Right.
You don't mind your CFO saying, I have a financial creative strategy. Let's talk about the pros and cons. I'm not talking about that. But at the end of the day, you want engineers who are dealing with ones and zeros to be totally accurate. You want, one of my disappointments in AI is horrible at math. And how can these giant computer systems be so bad at math? But if someone has a pilot light, I can coach that. You can guide that. You can say, Nagui, you fell just short of goal. May I make a suggestion? And Nagui says, I'm in. Put me in, coach. I'll do better next time. That's people want, that kind of nurturing. They want that kind of growth. And by the way, if you do a good enough job as leader in mentoring and nurturing that pilot light, you'll have less turnover. It's not all about money. Not at all. If people are leaving for money, then everything else is a failure, because people don't leave for money if they feel appreciated, if they're learning. I've always said, when I stop learning, I move on. But I am still learning at this age, and I love learning, and I think most people do. But they need to be given, like I said, the tools and the opportunities, and to do that. But they have to have a pilot light.
Yeah. And in our language, that's the behavior. To be respectful requires that they act respectfully, not just think respectfully. That nobody can read your mind. You can have the best intention in the world to respect people, but if you bully them and you bark at them orders that's not aligned with the behavior that will get you that respect, right? So constant reminder is, we can't just think things, we need to actually act them out. But I digress again. I think we wanted to show a little bit of that methodology that you use for compensation.
Sure, because this is something that everybody can do for themselves at their company, no matter what size.
Excellent. So this is it there. Hopefully that's readable. Can you see that okay?
I can see that fine. I hope everybody else can. You folks, if you want to enter full screen, I see that you can click the box on the screen and enter full screen, and this comes up. This looks far more complex than it is. So if you look right down the center and look to the left is the company. All right. The KPIs to the right are the accelerators that drive your compensation compared to how the company is doing. So this particular, this is a director of digital marketing and analytics. I've changed her name to Jane Doe. This was her actual, this is an actual bonus system. All right. The revenue goal for that year for this particular company was 10.4 million. The EBIT goal, that's the earning before interest and taxes, was 677,000. And her annual salary, she was a manager, she was a director, she was making 93,000. All right. So the box to the right that says quarters is a weighted percentage of what that 10 million is not divided by 4, because we all, if you're a retail business, you're going to have a lot bigger second and fourth quarters because of the holidays, the way they fall with Easter and Christmas and Hanukkah and things like that in second and fourth. So you're going to have seasonal weighting. In this particular case, this company did 31% of its revenue, almost a third in Q4. All right. So that gets balanced for that. So you have a cumulative quarterly down the left-hand side that takes into consideration those percentages. You've got the EBIT attainment. If the company reaches 80 to 99%, you get 2.5% of your pool. Reaches 100%, you get 10%, and so on. Then there's particular notes, that we agreed upon. And then the quarterly is very simple. So you've got Q1, Q2, Q3, 162 up to 214. If she makes 80% of her goal in Q1, she gets $581 for the quarter. If the company is doing particularly well, she can make up to $34.88. So in some ways, this is profit sharing, but it really isn't, because it is still driven by these KPIs and quarterly on the right. In this particular case, Jane, she had got 15 points for her reports. The right kinds of reporting as we had agreed upon, and those are reflected in those notes. Authentication for her email campaigns, the lift from authentication, social media content, which is I try to make what I caution people to do is do not make this subjective. It should be as objective as possible. And some positions are hard to create something completely quantifiably objective, but you can do it. In this particular case, she earned 75% down there in the yellow of the variable. So she got $1,743.75. And then each quarter will re-agree to either extending some of the previous KPIs or doing new KPIs. And I want to remind everybody what I had said previously. This rolled up to her boss, which then rolled up to me. In this particular case, I was going in with a troubled company as the acting CEO. And but all the way down, every single employee at the company got a percentage of this. And it's really, some people will say, oh, my company would never do that, or I can't afford that, or something like that. If the company doesn't do well, the employee understands their accelerator of their KPIs don't kick in. But it's not for most employees. For that Guatemalan cleaning lady, and it sounds racist when I call her a Guatemalan cleaning lady, but she, like I said, she spoke very little English, and I use her as an example. But again, her bonus was quite small, because it's a percentage of her total salary, and she wasn't even full time. So, but she still earned this particular bonus. But it's the point. Imagine being able to go home at any level and saying, we got $581. And by the way, by knowing your KPIs, it takes the subjectivity out. If the company is being transparent about its EBITDA, sometimes it can be just percentage growth. If the company doesn't want to share its revenue or something like that, you can still do it. I'll still know how I'm doing against that thermometer, so to speak. Right. And if I come home, my wife says, well, you promised we were going to remodel the bathroom. I was saying, you know what? It's a very good chance I'm going to make $2,906. That's a good down payment to remodeling the bathroom, or for us to go out for our anniversary dinner. I mean, it's not. We all like money, and we're all driven by money. But in this case, it's also the point that this is what we expect Jane to do. This is her key goals for her role. We all know what our day-to-day business is. We all know, when we eat, when we're hungry, we eat, and things like that. But but this is what the company is really measuring her success by, and she knows that this is the most important thing for her to do in this quarter. And since it all rolls up, if everybody is successful and there's no ambiguity, because of giving Jane this goal, there was no ambiguity in her job. Jane doesn't have to worry about what her boss or I thought ever, because it's down in quantifiable numbers. And this is very liberating for both bosses and subordinates.
I love it. I love it. And I'll touch on that in a moment, where people can get maybe to you to get access to this or work with you on this.
I'm happy to ask, or have you send it out for
okay,
Nagui.
Perfect. I do have a question around the language, and you mentioned profit share. Do you use that language? Do people get more excited when they think their KPIs attached to like a profit share, or is it better not to say profit share and keep it, separate within their bucket? If you do well and the company achieves X amount of target, what's the language that you?
I would never use the words profit share.
You would never.
I described it here today from a organizational understanding of how this works. But when I explain this to employees or boards of directors, people that I've worked for, it's important to understand that I don't earn a personal variable, can't expect a personal variable if the company is not doing well. On the other hand, if the company is doing particularly well because everything's working, timing is working, people are working, all the planets are aligning, and we've now hit 120% of goal, and I can potentially earn $3,488. Then I should do a little bit better if I'm kicking the ball out of the park, myself. But no, I think profit sharing has a lot of negative connotations. Right. I think it's looked at, or it can be looked at over the years, as being greedy, and it also has the connotation of being subjective. What the reason there's so many boxes and real numbers here is it's very objective and very quantifiable. The company is doing well or having a tough time, and then you don't go promise your partner that we're going to remodel the bathroom or we're going to have a special vacation because the company's having a tough quarter. So you're sharing in the success. But I would be very careful not to use those terms.
I love the model because we often get into bonuses discussions, and you get some people saying, well, I deserve more, and all this sort of stuff, and how come he's getting this much? He didn't do anything, all of that animosity that can occur when you don't handle this properly. But I think this model is fair. It rewards everybody based on also they're achieving their KPIs within their structure.
And to that point, this is done before the quarter. So I'm not subjectively saying, Nagui, I'm not going to give you the $3,488 that you might have been able to earn. I'm going to give you $581 because the company had a tough year. And you're going to think, that just here. It's like I said, there's no ambiguity. Everybody knows, and you and I have agreed on the terms, not only what those KPIs are, but I've had employees successfully argue, authentication lift is so much more important than social media content. Social media content is not doing X, Y, Z. So you say, okay, we're going to give social media 15 points, and we're going to give authentication lift 35 points because that's more of the driver of success. And you leave those meetings and saying, are we in agreement? Everybody good? You good for this quarter? You clear what my expectations are? Clear what your concerns are? It's just a far more democratic approach to managing expectations up and down. I mean, we spend as much time managing up as we do down in life. Even CEOs have a boss. They have a board of directors. They have an ownership committee. They have two daughters and a wife, like I do, who tell me what to do as soon as I get home. We're never the ultimate authority, and this just democratizes it.
Yeah. And I bring back the behavior into that because attitude multiplies success, 10 times. It's I don't know what the exact multiplier is. I'd have to look it up again. But when we have, and I built a complete structure that brings in similar measurements on what are the observable behaviors that undermine or accelerate the success of the organization, such as, we throw words around like teamwork, but what is the measurements that you can identify that someone is a team player or is the person that's the rotten apple that's undermining the team and sabotaging the team? So there's another perhaps multiplier that comes into play when you look at breaking down reporting versus authentication. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. But if you break those down, there's an element of the task and the numbers, and there's an element of the attitude and behavior that's involved in that. Not to digress too much down that path, but I just want to kind of remind people of that element as well. I'm looking at the time. I see some comments. Thank you, people, for attending. Michael, it's been amazing. If anybody wants access to this, you mentioned that they can contact me. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. If they have any questions, they can reach out to me.
I'll just see if we stick that on the screen. So our Nagui at biqorg.com, you can reach me there, or just on the social media platforms if you want to connect with us. Someone's always watching our social platforms and engaging with people, etc., trying to respond to everybody. So thank you again. My gosh, we can talk for another hour, but
I always enjoy speaking with you.
Yeah, likewise. Enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And I think we'll do this again, Michael. I think there was a lot more that we could dive into. So
certainly could. Happy to do it
immediately, but let's keep that in mind and do that.
Great. Everybody in the States, wishing you a great holiday.
Yeah, absolutely, you guys. Take care. See you all next week.